What's going on, Maschine Masters? My name is MGTheFuture. Today I got another exclusive tutorial for you guys. As you can see, I'm going to be covering the Playboi Carti project in this particular episode of What Would Playboi Carti Do? But more than anything, I credit this particular overview to his producers. Within the tracks that I analyzed today, Fraud, Pierre Bourne, and Hit Boy are all featured as far as analyzing different techniques and things that I absorbed from this project. And this video is kind of like a hybrid video too, because it's not just about making Playboi Carti beats per se, but it's more about the workflow of what you would need if you're participating in track dumps, submitting tracks to established artists or artists who are requesting tracks, and things of that nature. Even working with local artists who have a style or a sound that they're pursuing, and you know, when you question an artist on what do they like or what do they want, it's really hard for them to answer for some reason. I personally don't understand that, but I can see how it can be tricky. So what I normally do is I'll ask an artist, what are you listening to? What are some of your previous songs, if you recorded any? What do you freestyle to? And I kind of analyze and try to get a feel for what it could be or what elements that are in common that could be making that particular connection with the artist. So in doing this particular video walkthrough, hopefully those techniques can be universal and applied to your individual circumstance. So first things first, Playboi Carti. There's a few tracks here. I have everything laid out a particular way. I'm gonna go a quick overview of how I marked it, how it came to my mind first, and then I'll reverse engineer it and see if I can put something together using these techniques. So this one is called chord progression, and that's because I was analyzing the chords here. Let me go ahead and play this for you. I'm gonna loop it up a few times. Let me go ahead and turn this down. So this particular track is really bass heavy. And I noticed from the chord, there's only 2 chords, and it sounds like an ARP and a synth. Along with a high lead or flute instrument, and this kind of isolates those chords even further. And another cool thing to pick up from that is in a lot of his tracks, especially in this project, the hi-hats are straight. And the drums as well have that Zaytoven, Drummer Boy, Shorty Red style and flair. The next one is mix. This one's a little bit trickier because it's not straightforward and I'm unable to loop it on a micro adjustment level, but I just want to show you what my thinking pattern was for this. So what I like to do with a lot of tracks is kind of see the difference in level between elements. And you can almost, if you get used to it, you can almost read waveforms like a book. So I want to play the sample first and then show you what I was thinking. So 2 things to point out here. A, this is also very bass driven. As you can see, the bass is the loudest element. And if you zoom in even further, you have the claps, the hi-hats, and that waveform in between, which is the lowest peak, is the synthesizer. And you'll notice this in a lot, especially back in the day, the sound clip producers, they always have their drums really big and their instruments really low. But the reason why you can hear the instruments is because there's some sort of a expander pushing up the RMS level, but keeping the peak level down. What I mean by that is there's a pretty cool plugin by Sonic's Oxford called Inflator. Inflator will increase perceived loudness without changing your peak level. So I'm assuming they're doing that on the master track. Even in Isotope Ozone, which is what I use, you can use the exciter for the same effect. But yeah, so the loudest element's bass, second loudest clap, third hi-hats. In all his tracks, the hi-hats are fairly dominant. All right, next part up is effects. I think this is the one that Hit Boy put together. So a few things going on here. That's the lead element of this particular track. The flute has a reverse or a pitch down turn every I guess every half bar, because it's a bar long, and it's also being panned left to right. Later on, right after this part, you're gonna hear the bass lower itself in octaves, so it starts really high, comes down a level, then goes really low. And that's sort of like a breakdown or a tension release right before the hook comes back in. And lastly, drums. This one's really straightforward. I think it's a big pad track, but the drums are kind of busy and it let me clearly hear the drum elements he was using. So that has quite a few elements, and from that's how I built my drum kit. That's just some various elements to use so you can sprinkle over the track. Real generic trap kit, you know, the Zaytoven kits, the Lex Luger kits, the Shorty Red, Drummer Boy, anything you get your hands on. We all have those snares and kicks. So that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much my rough analysis of what was going on and how I broke it up mentally. And how I picked these tracks is I picked the leading single. So I pick a track from an artist's catalog or a project that everyone is familiar with. Then I pick out a track that is not a single but gets the most views or the most attention from ears on the street or social media. And then I pick 2 or 3 tracks that resonate with me. And it doesn't have to be the whole track or the content. It could just be a pretty cool effect that they use, certain breakdown, certain vibe or chord progression. And then I analyze that. And I do like a law of averages. And then break it down as I just did. So the first thing we want to do is deal with the instrumentation. Everything's real simple. I kind of have a generic palette together. I have a lead sound. I have an ARP. I have a synth for the chord stabs. I have a Vox effect, which is in everyone's music. Might as well infuse it into something like this. And just a generic 808 sub. And of course the drums. So the first thing I want to figure out is the chord progressions. A lot of these tracks that are on this album are very short progressions. So it's kind of like a 2 chords maximum. Some had 3, some had 4, depending on what they were doing. They might even have chord change-ups, but finding those 2 chords are imperative. So right away you would think they might do something like 1 and 5 within a scale. But that's a really big jump. So instead what I've noticed is that they're using the old school trap progression, which is a minor to a major. That's 1 step apart, or half step apart. Which was C minor and C sharp major. So in order to build that, or to build around that particular formula, I wanted to find out what scale that falls in, because that's not C minor and that's not C major. And this is a pretty cool website because it allows you to put in the keys and it tells you every scale that contains those keys. All right, so since we're going from C to C sharp, just as a template, we want to find out which ones start with C or have C and C sharp in dominant roles, such as the 1, the 4, and the 5. So right away, this one shows up. I'm not even going to butcher that word. So it's the 1 and the 2 in this one. They use Dorian a lot, which is the 2 and the 3 in this one. And then just in major scale, it's here. It's the 3 and the 4. And Low Korean looks cool too, because in this particular context, it's the 4 and the 5, making G the 1, which is dope, which might be the best bet if you want to go for that style. So G, Low Korean. So we can do that with this synth. We can go to MIDI effects, scale, see if I already have Low Korean made. And our C right here is 1, 2, 3, 4. And our C sharp is 5. And hopefully G is the number 1. So all we got to do is worry about the 4th and 5th element from that one. And you can take that a step further, so we can use a chord modifier prior to the scale conform. Use just a major chord. So that means I only have to hit 1 key at a time to write this chord progression. And then you can go through all the keys in the scale and see if there's any other chords you like. The 1 and the 4 and the 5 are the best sounding ones as far as grouping goes. So we'll stick to that. And what I can do with this is copy this to my other elements as well that are chord based, such as ARP. So tempo wise, we have a few options. In this particular example, I kind of randomly picked 2 low tempo and 2 fast tempo. So 157 is close to 160, which is 80. The other one's 81. So the median of 80 beats per minute. And this one is 126, 133 with a median of 130 beats per minute. So between 60 and 80 beats per minute overall. So let me go for 130. And I want to keep me a little rhythm going. I'm going to do hi-hats first. Now I can worry about the chord progression. And let's make sure the ARP feels right doing that too. The ARP's kind of lazy, so it's going to mess up the timing a little bit. That's the tricky part about Serum. The different envelopes are not necessarily beat, or they're not sync or locked all the time. So as you can see, I'm literally just playing 1 note per chord. I'm gonna go ahead and consolidate those. I'm gonna go ahead and quantize those and make sure that downbeat hits so that ARP is triggered correctly. Now the next part, you probably want to do the bass or the lead. I'll try out the lead. Their leads are pretty high in these particular beats, almost like flute range. Let's do it. And that's just the Vox, real simple at the end there. And basically I'm building this particular melody out of the chord. You can find the notes or the sequence of notes within that chord that sound or work best for what you're doing. And like I noted earlier, there's an auto pan going on the Hit Boy particular track. So we could do that on the Vox here. So it's pretty straightforward, and that's just off of 2 chords. The infamous trap chords at that. In this particular example, it's in Locrian mode. So last things last as far as the main instruments go. We just need a simple bass line. And again, it's single notes. You can just follow the root if you want to. So I'll break up the monotony of that 1-bar loop and double these, so I can make the bass line a different variation, or a 2-bar variation in the bass line, to kind of make the track flow a little bit better. And these are literally just following the root notes of the chords until it gets to the end, which is the last note of the 2nd chord. So now I can work on the drums. His drums are more like Zaytoven, not his drums per se, but the drums they use where there's multiple claps and snares going. So it's like a boom, pap, 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 a boom, pap. I want to try that out with different snare elements. Let's consolidate the drums so I can add my variations to it. Basically, I'm just trying to get decent levels on it and make sure that the closed hi-hat's the leading element. I can add a little bit more to that. I don't like straight hi-hats as much as this particular project did. So there is some triplets in here. So I'll just add some slight variations real quick. All right, so that's pretty much it for the drums. I'd probably go harder if there wasn't a time restraint as far as what I'm trying to convey or the point I'm trying to get across. All right, and the last part, just to switch things up a little bit, we have that extra chord we can use, which is the G. So that's just one note, one chord. And I'm gonna show you why I'm doing this. Basically what I wanna do, or what I wanna convey here, is just a quick switch up or change up so I can do the bass variation. Alright, so we got a simple bass pattern, lowering an octave until we switch it or we get the drop on the other side. That high pitch is really high. So what I'll probably do is bust it out to its own layer, turn it down, compress it a little bit harder, and filter off some of those highs on a separate track so it doesn't affect the entire bass line. But for example purposes, that's all they're doing. They're just dropping it down as the beat goes on and it wraps back, because we're using those same four chords, the 1, the 4, and the 5. Of course, the main progression is 4 and 5. This little break is just a 1. I'm gonna try to add one more thing to it if I can, without it sounding too flooded. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as what would Playboi Carti do. And I know I spend a lot of time building and going quick fast through some of these elements, but that's exactly what I wanted to show you guys, that it's really simple. Once you have a game plan, the game plan is so important. In this particular context, of course, we lucked out with only needing to use 2 chords and using a lot of familiar elements that most of us are using in our production anyway. But that doesn't take anything away from these guys that were part of this project. But I found it interesting that almost all the different producers that were involved in this project all contributed a vibe or a beat that contain these elements. Like, they can overlap with each other. Even if you do key finder on these tracks, you'll notice that the keys move into each other. It all flows together. So I don't know if that's Carti's A&R. I don't know if that's what he asked for directly from each producer, or if he was just going through 1,000 beats and his ear picked out all the beats that were in that same vein. But either way, you have the keys now to do this with intention. So when you're on these different websites that want track dumps for certain artists, you can just go through their recent catalog and, you know, create a hybrid mix and bring your own style and sound to it. Or if you want to do stuff for TV, it's the same exact thing. But anyway, hopefully you guys found this useful. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the box below. Thank you guys as always. I'm MGTheFuture. You can follow us on social media. I'm on Instagram at MGTheFuture. Also, be sure to follow the at Maschine Masters. I'll leave that at the bottom of the video. Anyway, guys, until next time, this is the Maschine Masters.